Back. Alright, so in my last video, I promised you that I was going to show you my tattoos when I got them, and surprise, surprise, I got them last night. Judas came home early. And then I also promised that I was going to show you some drawings. So, here are the tattoos first. I don't know how well you can see those, but my semicolons are intact. Yes, they are wet right now. I have to keep treatment on them, obviously, that's tattoo care. And they should only take maybe a week, 2 weeks to heal because of how small they are. Now, I'm also going to show you my drawings. I have like a little wall here of my drawings, actually. So you can feel free to see those drawings. This is one of my favorites, actually. Now, going into the subject matter of this video, I want to discuss something more serious. I want to actually discuss some common myths about schizophrenia. As I've mentioned before, my boyfriend Judas is schizophrenic. He has paranoid schizophrenia. And his brother actually has catatonic schizophrenia. Those are the two I know most about because it's in his family and I do my research. But I don't know a whole lot of things about the other types. So I'm just going to address 5 myths in this video, and there are a lot of myths surrounding people that have schizophrenia. So, one of the myths is that schizophrenia is synonymous with multiple personality disorder. This is not true, okay? If you've ever watched TV, you know this isn't true. Multiple personality disorders, people tend to switch, and they believe they're completely different people, like 2 people, 3 people in one body, and they're not. They are one person, they just have a different function in their brain that makes them think there's more than one person in there. Schizophrenics do not have any delusions that they are more than one person. They know they are one person. Schizophrenics do have delusions, though. There's another myth that there is only one type of schizophrenia. This is also a big myth. Okay, there's about 4 or 5 types, and they include paranoid schizophrenia like Judas has, at which point you hear and see and just generally sense things that are not actually there. For him, he hears voices. But the thing is, not all paranoids hear voices, they just hear things that aren't there. Noises, scratchings, anything, you know. Judas in particular hears voices in the other room, talking about what they're going to do to him the minute he lets his guard down, how they're going to kill him. And the reality is he's terrified. And going off topic a little bit here, I've always been surprised at how fearless he seemed to me. He's completely fearless. He's had black widows as pets that he found behind his toilet when he lived in New Mexico. He's completely unafraid of any insects. He's not afraid of pain. In fact, he doesn't react to pain the way most people do anymore because he's hurt himself so often, and I'll explain that one later. But he's a fearless guy, and I ask him what makes him so fearless, and he looks at me and he just tells me it's not that he's fearless, it's that he's afraid all the time, constantly, and you get used to it to the point where it doesn't stop you anymore. And I feel kind of envious of that, but I also know better than to envy someone who suffers the way he does. Because he's not on antipsychotics, he cannot afford them. It's extremely expensive to get mental health assistance in any way. It's extremely expensive without health insurance. And to those of you who might ask, why doesn't he just get Obamacare? I have Obamacare, and guess what? It's useless. And I'll explain that in another video as well, because now's not the time. Anyway, he hears voices, and he generally is always very tense. He's always extremely tense. Another type of schizophrenia is disorganized. It's also known as hebephrenic schizophrenia, which refers to patients in which thought disorder and flat affect are both present. Now, what this is, thought disorders means it takes them a minute to get their thoughts together. This is present in Judas as well. He really has to think before he can say what he's saying. And I know you're probably thinking, well, most people have to think to get their thoughts together. It really takes him a minute of complete silence to get his thoughts together. The flat effect is something else he has as well. And the flat effect is the inability to convey emotions properly. You'll often seem apathetic at the worst times. At funerals, you're supposed to be crying or sad. He's not going to be crying. And he's not even going to show a reaction, actually. He does feel the sadness. He does feel those emotions, but he doesn't express them properly. In fact, I've only seen him cry once, and it was when a friend of his was killed, and it's a sad story that might come up another time. But that's the only time I've ever seen him cry. He does not cry. He does not express really any emotion other than apathy very well. But if you get to know someone with schizophrenia, you can realize that you can know them and understand them without them conveying these emotions. Now, another type is catatonic, like I explained earlier. His brother has this. Now, catatonics go into episodes where they just don't respond to stimuli or to anything. They just become completely unresponsive. They are not dead. They just stop. It's like a comatose state, but they're awake. And it can be terrifying to those who don't know how to deal with it. There's also undifferential schizophrenia, in which point you show symptoms of nearly every single kind of schizophrenia. And then the last one is the residual schizophrenia. This basically it's all about patients who show symptoms of schizophrenia, but at lower levels than most people. Whereas Judas straight up hears these voices, and you can see him in his sleep twitching and freaking out because of these things that he hears. You might not even notice someone with residual schizophrenia. But moving on to the next myth. There's a myth that schizophrenics are always violent. This is not true. Okay, while the population of people with schizophrenia might have a higher tendency of violence in general than the entire general population of normal, quote-unquote normal people, that population is actually less likely to be violent than someone who is a violent drunk. Like, the population of violent drunks is more than that of violent schizophrenics. Now, that in mind, schizophrenics also do not convey violence towards other people. Not often, anyway, not typically. Most of the time, schizophrenic violence presents in self-harm. I've seen the scars on Judas's body because when he was younger, he used to cut himself with a hacksaw. He used to put cigarettes out on his own body. And that's not even half of the things he used to do. But I won't go into that because that's his personal history. And that's not okay to share. But understand that self-harm, self-mutilation is obviously not okay, but it's not presenting towards other people. So there's no need to actually be afraid of people with schizophrenia. But going on, another myth is that schizophrenia is caused by bad parenting, or personal weakness, or developmental delays, or low intelligence. None of this is necessarily true. Okay, while in some traumatic cases, schizophrenia can develop from that, it also has been linked to being genetic. Now, there are people who were genius-level IQ who were schizophrenic, including Beat Generation writer Jack Kerouac and Nobel Prize winner mathematician John Nash were schizophrenics. I'm looking up names because Judas doesn't give a crap about celebrities. I just want you guys to know that people with schizophrenia are actually usually incredibly intelligent individuals. They're very crafty and very resourceful. Judas, for instance, is the smartest man I've ever seen when it comes to a computer. He built his own computer, and while that may not seem like a big deal, he's been scrapping parts between 3 computers to keep them fixed for years. He has not bought a new computer in years. He can also code, he can speak 3 different languages, and he learns. Everything he learns like that. It's so quick. The point there is that schizophrenics actually are not proven to be slow or any of that, and to believe that they are is an incredibly disrespectful insult to them. But going on, the last myth that I want to address is this belief that schizophrenics cannot live fulfilling lives. We have an apartment. We live on the 3rd floor in a crappy little apartment that I like it. It's my home, but I don't like it because I hate bugs. But I've often asked Judas about this, and in fact, he's extremely happy with what he has, and he explains this to me every time I bring it up. He'll point around and say, I like what I have. I don't have anything that I don't like. He would point to me and say, I like you. Point to his guitar, say, I like that. I like my Xbox. And I like my pillow. And my blanket. And my home. And it may be a small, crappy home in someone else's eyes, but I worked for it. And this is me from his point of view. He worked for it. And it's because of him that he has this home. And there's very few things as pleasing to someone like him as having the things that you earned. I just want to leave off by saying one more thing. This is the same with anybody with any mental illness. Okay? They are not their disease. I have depression. Doesn't mean I'm sad and pouty all the time. I can smile very well, actually. I think you'll rarely see me crying or upset in these videos. And that's not even the pretense that I've learned to create. Because I'm in my own home, and I don't create pretenses within the walls of my home. The most disrespectful thing you can ever say to Judas, for instance, is beware of him because he's got schizophrenia. That's incredibly disrespectful. Because that's making him his disease, and he is not his disease. Judas is so much more than his schizophrenia. I am so much more than my depression. I have friends with other disorders. My friend Victoria, you know who you are. You are so much fucking more than bipolar disorder. Okay? And to anyone out there with a mental disease or a mental illness, you are more than that. And no matter how fucking ignorant people can be, you have to remember that they're not the ones who matter. In your life, it's you who matters. And I will get to this in another video as well, because this is dragging on. But this has been my video, and I have addressed some myths. So, promise made. Catch you next time.